We live, I guess.
I believe so.
You believe so? Ok, cool. Bom, boa tarde, pessoal. Tudo bem? A gente vai chegando, vamos começando a live aqui. Eu sou o João Melo, então a gente vai se apresentar daqui a pouquinho. A gente vai trabalhar um pouquinho assim, em cima de Test Driven Development hoje. A gente está aqui com um especialista, um cara que tive muito prazer de trabalhar há bastante tempo, que é o famoso PH. Paulo, eventualmente eu chamo de Paulo PH, mas uma vez PH, sempre PH. E, e eu acho que quem está aqui, primeiro, sejam bem-vindos. Muito obrigado aí pelo tempo e por tirar um tempinho para falar com a gente, para conversar. A gente tem um chat aqui, a gente vai estar também em outras redes sociais. A gente está hoje no Vimeo, no LinkedIn, no YouTube. É, e vai ser bem legal, a gente vai poder falar um pouquinho sobre engenharia, que é o que a gente gosta de fazer. Eu tô aqui hoje representando a Geek, o PH aí vai contar um pouquinho da história dele também, as empresas onde ele passou, os desafios que ele está tendo agora. Essa live vai ser uma live, vai ser um webinar aí em inglês, então daqui a pouco a gente vai fazer um switch aí de língua pro inglês. A gente é um conteúdo que a gente acha super interessante, que tem bastante audiência lá fora também. A gente vai contar um pouquinho, pegar hoje trabalha inclusive com uma empresa lá fora, já compartilhou com o pessoal de engenharia do time dele lá o link, o pessoal poder assistir depois. Eu não sei se questão de fuso o pessoal vai estar acordado agora para ver, mas provavelmente amanhã de manhã o pessoal já tem a gravação da live para poder assistir. Então a gente vai fazer ela em inglês para ter uma audiência um pouquinho maior aí. Espero que todos consigam entender, todos sintam aí que possam fazer perguntas. Podem fazer em português, fiquem à vontade, a gente traduz aqui no backstage. A Karina está com a gente hoje da Geek Hunter também, ajudando a gente com os links, com os comentários, para a gente não deixar nada passar. Alright? Okay, so let's warm up. I always like to, say that I need a little bit of warming up when it comes to
Yeah, sure,
talking
me too.
in English, and sometimes I right. And PH, as I was saying, we work together, and we also have been conducting interviews, like hiring interviews in English as well. So it's the same thing always, right? We kind of start warming up, and then eventually we get to the point where we can start discussing things that we found interesting. And test-driven development is one of them, right? So thank you again, everyone, to join us today. This is going to be what we'd like to call a pair programming session. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with pair programming as a concept, with extreme programming in general. But at Geeky Hunter, at least, we have always been fond of doing things in pairs. And PH here used to work with us, and we're going to discuss a little bit about it. And we were like discussing things, engineering things, the other day, and then we kind of had this idea to why not have a pair programming session to a broader public, right, to a broader audience, and to do what we have been used to do, that is discuss engineering topics. And today we're going to be discussing test driven development. That is something that I know by fact that PH is very fond of, and to be fair, he's one of the guys that helped us to implement this culture at Geeky Hunter, that have been coming from other guys from the team, and guys that are not here anymore eventually, but the culture persists. And I see João Solomon here in the audience. He used to work with us as well. Solomon,
Hello,
nice to
João.
have you here, man. So yeah, so that's what we're gonna do today. For those who are coming, right, I'm just gonna to say that again. We are doing that in English, actually, because we think that this topic is interesting to the point where we hope to reach a broader audience. So we have people here that work for international companies. We have developers here, Brazilian developers, most of them, actually, that are working or pretend or intend to work to companies, I don't know, either in US, Canada, anywhere, not Brazil. So eventually you have to have a common language to communicate with those people, and English is a common language that we are using today. So why not to do that in English? So people that want to kind of have a little taste of how to use English on a daily basis, like in a pair programming session, can find that interesting. And the topic itself, right? I was talking to Pega that what we're going to be discussing have some value to people that from, for example, the company that Pega is working right now. That is a US based company. So the idea is to so for those that which who are not Brazilian, I apologize already for our strong accent, but yeah, I really hope that you guys can understand us and find that interesting as well. All right. So, PH, my friend, enough talk, enough introducing by my side. Please, I would like to leave you a little bit of time to introduce yourself, and then from there we can start discussing a little bit what your experience is like, what you like to do, and what you're doing right now, like in terms of engineering and product. I know that you are very fond of as well, uh, not only TDD as practice, but as well as a guy that is very concerned about the product that you're working on. So if you can expand a little bit as well, what problem you're trying to solve right now with software. Okay.
Sure. So, first thing first, thank you for you guys having me here. So, as Melo mentioned, my name is Paulo Henrique, but you can call me PH, Paulo, PH, whatever. So, I've been working as a software engineer for almost 4 years, right? But like I joined this programming world, when I started my computer engineer back in 2017. So was there that I really started learning about programming, and I never programmed back until joined the college. So, and over the past 2 years, I focus on testing and TDD because it's like something that I'm particularly really passionate about it. I would like to say that when I started studying web development, I was lucky because I already started learning with tests. I already started learning what is the importance of testing, how we can do testing, and actually just testing TDD. I learned it before, after actually, but yeah. So I worked with Melo and Hunter for 2 years. So, and I recently, now I'm working on a Clipwire that is a US based company. So here we try to like reduce and prevent click frauds on PPC ads, per click ads. So that's why I'm doing right now. And as Melo mentioned, here we are doing implementing this TDD culture, testing culture here as well, the same way that we did back in 2 years ago at Geeky. So yeah, that's it, man.
Great, great. And I would like to later on we have a little bit of time, right? I'm gonna just lay down a little bit of how the schedule is gonna work for today, but I would love to discuss a little bit about your current experience, the things that you have been looking at, and I think that you are in a very interesting point, right, in terms of business, not actually engineering, but business, when you kind of have a company that is kind of accelerating in terms of growth, and then has to somehow organize, I like
Yeah,
to say, organize the house, right? Like we have that first line of codes, those controllers with 200 lines that we kind of inherit from the first developer, the guy that knew how to code the first MVP product. And then you kind of have to make sense of all that, introduce a little bit of good practices in general, and test driven development, at least for us, is one of them. So yeah, I'd like to discuss a little bit about that. um yeah, so I'm sorry to you guys. I don't think that I introduced myself properly. People call me here Geek Hunter Melo. My name is João Melo. I'm, as Pega was saying, everybody calls me Melo over here. Today, I lead our product and engineering team at Geeky Hunter. I started as a tech lead when I joined Geeky in 2021, like 1 year and a half almost ago. And what I love about Geeky Hunter is first, when I joined, we were already having this culture of test driven development, like uh, full like in full deployment, let's say, to use a more like DevOps word, like we're implementing that and testing and making adjustments to it, and it's really all about culture, right? It's not about having someone telling that you need to write tests before you write your code. I need to pay attention to coverage, you need to pay attention to the business rules that you're testing. It's much more about like what kind of culture do you want in terms of product. How do you see quality, like what do you understand by quality in terms of software quality. Do you have or don't you have QAs? What are the roles of QAs in your company, and how do you manage that and mix it all together with a strong test culture? So I was kind of joining Geek Hunter in that context, and it was very. I mean, I've learned a lot with the guys, like with Salomon that was here, PH, Bini, Vini, Martins, guys that have been helping me to grow as a technical leader and developer, because by the end of the day we were always coding, some more some less, but we're always trying to either review a PR or implementing a little bit of code ourselves. And I think that process has been amazing, to be very honest. And I think that the challenge at Geeky Hunter in terms of products as well is very something that motivates me, because I like to tackle big problems. And I think that this problem of having a marketplace that connects tech professionals in general, not only developers and companies that want to try those talents, it seems easy and trivial by distance, but when you kind of go deep into the problem, you see that there's nothing easy about it, right? To get it right. So it's a problem that we have been trying to solve since I joined Gig Hunter, and for a few years as well. So this is like me, what I like to do, and I, as Pega was saying, I'm very passionate as well about DevOps culture, about testing culture. Before Geeky Hunter, I had opportunity to found a startup by myself. Like the startup that I had was like in an earlier stage than Geeky Hunter, like a pre-seed stage, and just before reaching a point where we do find market fit. So the dynamics were different, the market dynamics were different, but we kind of tried to apply everything that we found interesting in terms of extreme programming culture and DevOps culture from the scratch in that my previous experience, and I tried to bring a little bit of that to Geeky Hunter as well. And I found guys over here that I could that were as passionate as I was about it. So yeah, that's it about today, guys. What we have planned for you is going to be the following. We are gonna kind of just we have been warming up, right? Just discuss a little bit, introducing ourselves. I have a little questions that and topics that I'd like to discuss with Paulo, with PH. They're basically things that we found very very interesting to discuss about and very rich, which are much more related to what are the challenges like to adopting TDD, in a team, let's say an ongoing team, right? This was the challenge that we have at Geeky Hunter. We have a team already working, and eventually someone came and said, okay, why don't we try this? Why don't you try to change the way we do software, the way you think about software? And this is very challenging, and I'd like to explore a little bit about it, because it's also nice to have good frameworks and good practice and good things that we found or other people found that are good in terms of performance or quality for the software itself or speed of the product that we launch. But in the end, it all comes to culture, right? It all comes to how do we make people that are not used to do it. So I'd like to expand a little bit about it, and I'm going to profit that PH is here to help us to discuss it. And then we're gonna pass, after we discuss a little bit about it, we're gonna pass to a second part where we're gonna actually do a pair programming session. So it was not a clickbait. We are gonna do it. That's for sure. As I was telling you, part of our culture that was introduced at Geeky Hunter a few years ago is not only about it, it's also about pair programming, about working together to solve problems, and we see a lot of value in that actually. So we're gonna do exactly that, and then I don't know how much time we're gonna spend on that. PH was kindly enough to prepare a repository in GitHub. We're gonna share the links with you guys, so where we're gonna show you how we do test-driven development. So we're gonna start from having some expectations in terms of product itself, right? So we're gonna have some requirement things that our software have to do, and then you're gonna try to be as didactical as possible to show you how you can implement, how you can translate those requirements into specifications, and then eventually translate that into software. And we're going to be using Node.js in the backend, and PH has already prepared some front-end application as well to show you that independent of what you're touching in terms of stack and in terms of more front end or more back end side of the application, you can always have this mindset, right? And from my experience, the guys from a back end background have more, it's easier for them to think about tests and think about specs and TDD in general. But you can also expand that idea to front end application. There is no limit to that actually. You only have to come across and to understand if TDD is really worth it for you. And there are going to be some cases when it is not. It's not bulletproof, right? It's not something that you can apply to every situation. But when it comes to build product, to build it fast, to build it reliably, and to validate, as PH was saying, right? We love to work at startups and companies that are growing, that are trying to find a market fit, and when they found, when they're trying to expand and grow as quick as possible, and with some sort of minimum quality to that. And then something that may seem counterintuitive is that doing tests is not going to slow us down, but actually it's going to help us to move fast um, by the end of the line. So this is something that maybe, if you're not familiar with tests and TDD, maybe sounds a little bit weird, but we have experience in practice and in real life that um, expending time testing the application and doing TDD actually help us to move fast and help us to move with more quality when it comes to software. Not only for big companies, but especially for companies that are trying to grow as quick as possible and to find a market fit. So, all right. So, Pega, if you're okay with that, I think we can move in that direction. Is that all right for you?
Sure.
All right, man. All right. So I think the first thing that I'd like to discuss with you is like how how have you come across TDD? Like what was the first experience that you have like testing your application, and someone has ever told you about it? Was that in Geeky Hunter? Have you had a previous experience with that? How was it like for you?
Okay, so actually about TDD was in Geek Hunter that I started studying more deeper, But when I started studying web development, as I said, I already started with testing, So in my first experience, I already had the space, the opportunity to implement some testing. So it was with Node and React, but like the 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 company was different because I was the only developer in the company, so I didn't have much time to do it. So when I have the time, I try to implement some testing, and at least in the most crucial parts of the application. So and then when I joined Geek Hunter, we like we were starting to have this culture of testing DDD. Like Martins, that was our CTO back then. he already had this culture with him, so he started to expand his culture with the rest of the team. So when I joined Geek Hunter 2 years ago, we have like zero testing, to be very honest with you guys. So, and actually we started with implementing testing, and then we started to shift the way that we think and started doing TDD, because like, at least for me, it's it's already complicated to implement TDD in a team that is already running up, and it's way complex to implement TDD in a team that is already running up with no tests. So
For
that's
sure.
the way that we started here. So we started slowly. We knew that like we have more teams to help us, and he knew that the time that we were spending learning how to test, implementing the first test would be paid in the future. So that was a great thing that happened to us. And then slowly, I believe that after 6 months, when we started doing testing, we actually started trying to shift the way of thinking about testing and software and trying to implement TDD in our daily routine. So yeah, basically this was my first touch with TDD. So yeah, my teams helped us a lot.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's is very important to have a management that kind of takes the risks, right? Like, because
Yeah,
as
for
we're
sure.
saying, it's not very evident that spending more time testing the application is gonna pay it off in the future, especially if you have to like negotiate with other people inside the company. Like, you're trying to grow as fast as possible, you have limited resources, and then somehow a guy comes and say, okay, you know what, I think we should start testing the application and slow down now to gain traction in the future,
Yeah,
in the near future. And and of course, if as something that is new to you is gonna, of course, you're gonna have a time to of adapting to that. So the role of the leadership is very important to to
for
give
sure.
the security, right? To give this the sense of actually security to developers, that they are in the right path and that they can take the time to learn things. And one thing that you said I found very interesting, and I agree a lot with you, that testing is something, test driven development is another thing. Like, if you don't know
Yeah,
how to test an application, or you don't have experience with that, a good and solid experience, it's very difficult to try to start doing writing software from tests, because it's kind of trying to do something when you don't have the basis for that, right? And then when
exactly.
we are like discussing in hiring process in general, and when I'm discussing with other technical leaders and tech recruiters as well, is that, okay, I don't know, a candidate has told me that he or she has already experience with TDD, but when you kind of start discussing, going deeper, we kind of see that what the people really have is experience with testing,
With
and
testing,
some
just
sort of
testing.
experience with testing, and that's fine, and that's necessary, that's a
Yeah,
requirement. And I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm saying that it's very difficult to implement a culture of test driven development when the team doesn't have the culture of testing at
of
all.
testing
The
itself. Yeah,
point that you're saying, and today, to be very honest with you guys, we have a code base at Geek Hunter that has this, that kind of reflects these changes that have been happening in the past, right? Every code base that, unless you guys start from scratch and already knows how to properly write software, which probably is not gonna be most of the cases. What you're gonna see is like a code base that is just a reflection of what PGI was saying. Like, you have those big, gigantic
bottom
controllers that
was like
nobody touches, right?
dark places, that you never want to touch it.
Yeah, you're kind of just hoping that to be a black box that you never have to touch it, because if you need
Yeah,
to re-implement that, it's much better to write everything off and then start from scratch. And then it's very challenging, actually, right? How you get that kind of code base, and how you introduce some sort of coverage, and actually introduce this culture of testing. And I do agree with you. And when I came at Geeky Hunter, I know probably almost a year after you came, right? I guess you
Yeah,
started in February and me
February
in December.
2021. Yeah,
Yeah, 10 months actually difference. Where I realized that I've already I was seeing people that wanted to test the application, that were concerned about things related to test, that testing in TDD was kind of a common language that we had
yeah,
in the tribe, what we used to call the chapter, right? The development chapter. So
yeah.
we are
And
discussing those things, right?
actually, this started, of course, with Martins, but like back in 2 years ago, we had a small team. It was just like Martins, Bini, that was our tech lead, me, and two or three other devs, and like implementing TDD, implementing this testing culture in a team, a small team. It's easier to implement in a bigger team, right? So what we focus on was like you said before. We tried to reach out and hire people that at least already have this experience with testing and know the importance of testing, because then implementing and like saying to them that it's worth to do in TDD will be easier than just trying to hire maybe a very good developer, but that don't concern about testing. So I believe that the hiring process and how you select the people for your team also had a big importance, in this kind of implementing this culture. So that's what we did also back then.
Yeah, and I do know that because you and Bini were the guys that interviewed me
Yeah,
for the position of technical leader, right?
yeah,
But it's
that that's true too.
and and that's something that I found, among other things, right, that made me want to be part of the team was this kind of like engineering culture and really concern and I I don't think that we someday be perfect in terms of having in terms of coverage or in terms of skills itself, like um to reach out as a full stack developers, right? Here at Hunter we are full stack developers, web developers. It's very difficult to have someone that knows everything, and it's kind of unrealistic to think that we're gonna have. But what I did like to see when I started was that people were willing to discuss about things, right? When you have engineering meeting chapters, chapter meetings, once every 15 days, we're all discussing about things, right? Discussing, trying to be better in terms of writing software. And that we had actually by the time with Martins and the guys, a leadership that bought us, right? That took the risk to move the project and the marketplace in that direction. And I think that is very important. And I don't know, Pega, if you kind of remember maybe one or two challenges that the guys had by the time that they started implementing. You said already that a small team kind of helped you to because there are fewer people, so it's better to communicate and to introduce a culture. What for you, for example, as a developer, what was kind of a challenge that you had when you kind of started doing your first pull requests, and you said, okay, I don't know about you, but for example, me, when I started doing TDD, one thing that for me was very difficult was kind of to shift, like to start thinking about the test first, and resist the temptation to kind of let me fix a bug. For example, I always try to resist the temptation to fixing the bug, one line code bug, instead of writing a spec
Writing the
in the
test, yeah.
description and yeah, writing the test to make that fail and things like that. To me, that was like the part that was the hardest for me, right? To shift my view and try not to fix things uh, pu- punctually, right? But instead writing
Yeah,
tests and then making the process.
yeah. I can say this same. Definitely, I had the same feeling. Especially like imagine a code base with 7 years old that had zero testing, so we had like a big ball of mud, a code, all the code inside the controller. So imagine that you like, the line you have to change to fix the bug, but you need to write the test first. So at first this doesn't make sense, so and it's really hard to do this, especially when we are in a code base like this. So if, like, I don't know, we are a new code base with few codes, few services, few controllers, will be easier to do this because eventually the code will be less complex. But I can say that the biggest challenge for me was to shift the way of thinking, because like just doing the test before the implementation, that's not TDD, it's one of the parts of doing TDD. So in my opinion, the biggest challenge is to, you know when you have to fix a bug, first you have to think about how you're gonna test it. Then before thinking about how you're gonna fix it. You know,
Yeah,
it's
precisely.
doesn't make sense, but that's precisely exactly what TDD is about. So, and when you do this kind of shift, you eventually will the code that you get eventually will be less complex, less couple, more simple, because first you are concerned about to resolve the problem. You're not concerned about how you're going to implement it. I don't know, like, I have this future, I have this task to do it, and then I read the requirements, and I already think about how I can use this pattern, I can use this service to implement this, I can use, I don't know, a worker to call another service. And we it's normal to think about it, and that's okay. But first, you need to test, you need to think how you're going to test it, because you can write the the better code that you can get, the most beautiful code. It doesn't matter if you don't have the test for it, or if it's really hard to test it. How you're gonna have the confidence to deploy this to production? So when you shift this, when you shift the way of thinking, and you start thinking about testing first, you eventually will have a less couple code, a less complex code because of it. So yeah, definitely shifting the way of thinking about software is the biggest challenge while implementing TDD.
Yeah, and you said a lot of things that I agree with everything that you said, but two things kind of triggered me, and experiences that I had, good and bad experiences. And one is that for me, TDD is like I see as some sort of bulletproof for over engineering, right? So when we try to kind of, especially when we don't have the as much experience as you know, like some most like as someone that kind of knows a lot of patterns and either design patterns or architectural patterns that can help us to write better software. We as developers always try and tend to like go to the more complex path. That's something that every developer that I knew, me including myself, we always try to kind of do more that we what more than we need to to deliver value to the customer in the end, right? If you want to deliver value, TDD is the way to go, because as we think about the implement the Priyaga is gonna show us later today, but when you think about the requirements, what we're trying to achieve in terms of product, we kind of okay, what is the simpler like software that we can write that delivers that to me?
Yeah,
I
like
let someone
the
right.
client, he doesn't care if you're implementing
Of course, he
tree
doesn't care, and
architecture or I don't know hexagonal architecture. He just wants you to solve the
it doesn't matter.
problem, so it
It
doesn't
doesn't matter.
matter.
And what I try when I make the points about over engineering is that somewhere, someday, in the future, into the future, down the road, eventually you're gonna get a very successful product if you're doing things right, if we're learning about the problem, if we're implementing that with quality and fast as we can. We're gonna reach a point where our monolithic application is not gonna serve us anymore. For example, if we have some sort of if the market that we are in, and if the user behavior is some sort that needs us to have some flexibility that a monolithic application cannot give us. But this is not something that you have to, we're talking about, designing of the application itself, but it also happens in the designing pattern that we are using inside the application. And we don't need to worry about those things when you're trying to solve problems and trying to have the easiest and less complex solutions and implement those into production. Because in the end of the day, as I was talking to earlier to you guys, today, we love to work with startups that are either growing or expanding or trying to find market fit. And to be honest, we don't have the time to implement the best software possible. We have to implement something that show us that we are in the right track. And eventually we're gonna hire guys that are better than us, that are specialists and architects. They're gonna come and say, you know the job that you guys have been doing for the past 5 years, it sucks. You should put all to the garbage and write everything from scratch. Okay, then by that time you're gonna have the money and the capacity to do that. But when we like to write software and to give pace to product, I think TDD is the way to go. And it is actually, to me, I'm very how can I say, I'm very have I have a very strong about it. I have a strong feeling about it, that it also help us to overcome that it happens to every developer that is try to over engineering solutions, right? When you don't have to. And this is something that I got told you that I found very very moving to me, because I've been that place already, of course, as every developer.
Yeah, me too.
Everybody did, right?
Yeah,
And the other thing that you are talking about is about the confidence to put something to production. And that's very important, because there are a lot of projects and companies and places where a developer writes a code and deploy that into a staging branch, and then eventually a QA analysts are gonna to give a green sign, right? Okay, that software looks good. Your task, your story, your epic can go to production, so the client can see that. And that's fine. That's valid. That's a way to do software. But we don't like to do that in that way at Geek Hunter. What we try to do is that we want the developer to have confidence that he or her software is ready to production, and those guys are the ones that are going to deploy to production. And if there's some bug
yeah,
afterwards, we can always roll back, right, the migration.
like having
But
the ownership, act,
you have
definitely
the
the
ownership
ownership.
of the
Yeah,
and the point is, how do you have confidence that what you're writing is going to work, right? Because today, I don't know if all of you guys know, but today Geek Hunter is a platform that have hundreds of thousands of unique access per month. So we're talking about some platform that have the tens of millions of access every month. So it is a big product, right, in terms of access and people accessing the platform. So how do how do you become confident that something that you are touching is not gonna break the signing or the sign up flow of application that is used as much? So test your application is a way to go, right? Is a way that you the first
definitely.
test that you write, you're gonna say, not very confident. 2 years later on down the road, you're gonna say, now I'm very confident what I'm doing, and I have good processes, and I don't need a QA analyst to tell me that my software is ready to production, right? Maybe I can have some sort of design validation, other steps, but in terms of the functionality, I'm very confident that I can put that in production and assign off to that. And if there is a problem, we can always roll back, but we don't have that extra step in our process. So, all right, great. Just a last question, Pega, before we kind of start, coding a little bit. How can you kind of just tell us a little bit about what the challenge that you're having right now? You kind of told us earlier that you are actually implementing some testing TDD culture into ClickGuard. How is that help working for you? How are the guys? Are the guys ready to do that? How are you feeling that the people um, are ready or not to do that, to make that step?
Yeah, so like when I joined here, ClickGuard, it was exactly the same when I joined Geek Hunter back 2 years ago. So here we have like zero testing, and but we like the rest of the team wants to start testing. Our CTO wants to start testing. He wants to implement this culture here. So this make the things a little bit easier. So my biggest challenge here right now is to first, as I already said, implement the testing culture here before implementing the TDD culture, because as we already discussed it, the TDD is like a second level, a next level. You can ask people that never did test to, oh, now you're gonna do test and you're gonna do test this way. So like you can do this. So my challenge here is to like create a culture and explain the other devs why the importance of testing, how you can start doing testing both in back end, both in front end. Writing some examples and doing some pair programming with us, with them, to share this culture. And then eventually it will happen the same thing that happens in Geek Hunter. Over the next month, when the developers and the team had the experience with testing, we can start like implementing TDD, because like we can't just go through and start with TDD. You have to make sure that everyone is in the same level. Everyone understand testing, understand the importance of doing it, and then you can start shifting and asking them to test first. So yeah, basically this is my challenge here.
Cool. And I think the guys really like aced like to trying to get you and hire you, because you do have experience with that. So I think it's gonna work out in the end. Um,
Yeah,
so
the test paid for me. The
yeah,
I was hired exactly to do this. So study test.
yeah, exactly. The guys made very clear that they were hiring you because you did have this experience. So yeah, it pays off in the end. Um,
It pays off.
okay, all right, so we kind of have still like 45 minutes to do a little bit of pair programming session. I think that you prepared something for us. Uh, just
Yeah.
before that, Wesley said hi. So Wesley was one of the guys that worked with us here at Geek Hunter
Hello,
as
Wesley.
well. Uh, Hello, my friend. We kind of missed you over here. Um, so he's one of the guys as well that when I kind of remember one of the first pair programming sessions that I had, me, him, and Beanie, the guys were discussing about tests, the time that the suite was taking, what it could do to accelerate, to speed up the suite of tests. And yeah, as again, I found there was a thing that I found very interesting, that the guys were always discussing about things, and Wesley was one of the guys as well. All
Yeah.
right, so let's do it, man. So, what have you prepared for us?
Okay, so talk is ship. Show me the code. So we will start with uh, how we can do TDD, and we will go through TDD in a simple node project. So if you guys give me 1 sec, I will share my screen.
Let's do it.
Okay, I believe that. Everyone is seeing my screen?
Yep. So
Nice.
we're here.
So here we have a very simple node project. I already did some initial setup with Jest, Prettier as Lint, and in TypeScript. So let's see the requirements of the task that we are going to do right now. So I try to create a simple register creation. We need to create the feature that we need to create is allowing the user to register in our app. So basically this that like every when you I don't know the PM of your team write the card, the task, and we have some requirements that we need to fulfill. And sometimes the requirements are very clear, sometimes not. So sometimes the requirements are explicit in the task, sometimes not. So this is one of our job, also to like read the requirements and trying to, as Melo said, transform this in specifications and tests, and eventually transform this to a code. So let's go through the requirements here. So the user is required to provide name, email, password, and password confirmation to be able to register. The username minimum length is 3. The user password minimum length is 8. The user password and password confirmation should be equal. And the user should not be able to register with an email that is already used. So simple requirements here, some validations of fields, but simple ones. And then one requirement that we should always fulfill is that the return of this operation, the return of the API to the front end, should always be in this format. So we should have an object with success that is a boolean that will tell us if the operation has succeeded or not. We will have an errors object that will store all the validation errors. So for example, if the object had name blank, this tells us that the user did not provide a name. And finally, if everything went well, we should return the ID of the created user. If not, we should return null. So,
Great.
okay, great.
Man, just a comment. I think you'd be surprised how many requests don't have like this kind of return expectation object, right? I kind of lost the count of how many APIs I have worked with, or development of APIs I've been working with, that you kind of have guys expect, like, they have the expectations for everything that the endpoint must do, but they kind of, I don't know why, they forget what they need, right, in terms of the
Yeah,
response object. And it seems really like trivial, but I've lost count of um, times that I've seen that that kind of expectation is not set. And to be very honest, it's very very hard to have a, let's say, imagine that this is a task, right? In
yeah,
your pipeline of development, it's very very hard to have a task that is so well detailed and have everything explicit. And most of the time, I think PI is one of the guys that like that the most at the team. You have to come back to the product manager and work with
yeah.
them
That's
actually to have, okay, can you be a little bit preciser here? What do you need in terms of requirements? Because in the end, you have to translate that to expectation file, to tests, to scenarios of tests. So it's very hard to have that in terms of what Pegas is showing you guys, and probably is gonna have you're gonna have to work a little bit on top of what you get from a product manager or a product owner to come out with a detailed description of your requirements.
yeah, that's totally true. So, okay, so let's let's begin. So I will just start doing creating two folders here, a source folder and a specs folder. And I will just create the signature of the class just to have something to start off. So I will call this this create user service, whatever service, right? And then I would just create the create user service class here and export this class. And in this X folder, we will create the test. So we can create like create user service dot spec dot gas. And then we can just like we are using Jest here, so we can create just a describe here that will tell us that we are testing this service, and just to make sure that everything is working, I will just create some it works here. I empty it works, and then I will try to run the test. So I have here two scripts. I will use the test watch just to watch the test and rerun every time that I save the file. So if I run this, probably it's gonna pass. Yeah, it passed, but like we are not doing anything, just to make sure that the jest is finding the file and run it. Okay, so let's come back in our requirements here. Let's put this aside. And at least what I like to start when I'm doing TDD is to try to fulfill the easiest requirement and the most straightforward requirement that we can do here. In my opinion, we can start with this requirement that the user is required to provide name, email, password, and password confirmation to be able to register. So we can create here another describe that's gonna be our context, right? And we can create, we can name this context, for example, when missing required fields. And why I'm writing in this way, because as we discussed, we want to create a specification of our test of our code. So we want to translate these requirements to specifications and eventually in code. So it's a good way to, it's a good thing to write the test like you are telling a story to someone, you know. So here we have when missing required fields and what we expect when we are in this context. Probably we can expect something like it returns and blank error on all missing required fields, something like this. And then we can first, let me put this on our side, and first initialize our service here. You create user service, and we can run it. So user service, we can, I don't know, call it the method with perform, and we will pass an object with name that's gonna be empty, and then we can pass email, password, and password confirmation, and then we will expect that the result to be to be to match object. And what is the object that we expect is in this format, right? So we expect that success will be false because we have a validation error, right? And then we will expect that the errors object with a blank error in all missing required fields. And then data will be null. Okay? So if I run this, I have a red test. It's failing because we even create the function perform. So, and that's okay. We will do this first. But first, I will just commit this. So I will add the changes and commit with like missing required fields. Okay, and then we can start implementing some stuff here. Remember, we are first doing the assertions. First, we are trying to write the test and write what exactly you want to expect in this context. And then we will try to, like, when we are in red, it means that when we are in a failing test, we always want to think about what is the most straightforward change in the code, the cheapest change in the code that we can do to go to green. So if you have always, like while doing TDD, if you have this in mind, we'll like have better code and we'll start learning and knowing the TDD fast. So what is the most straightforward thing that we can do here? Probably create perform. If I create a perform function here, now it's saying that I expect this object, but I receive undefined. Okay. So what we can do here is just return exactly what we want to match, because this is the most straightforward thing that we can do in this test to make it pass. So now we are green. Great.
Perfect.
But like this code is not ready to production, if you look at this code, if you have code like this and you like have like the feeling that this is not right, it's because it's probably missing some tests. So, and that's exactly true. So I will commit this, and now
Pega,
it's
so why you are committing, just to make sure that everybody gets it. So the test should fail,
yeah,
right? First. So it actually is your intention to make that fail, and then you're going to perform the cheapest adjustment to your class or object under test. Let's say can be a class as you are coding, that are gonna to return what you need, right? In terms of scenario, is that right?
yeah, exactly. So while doing TDD, we always have these three states: the red state that we normally start with, the green state, and when we are in green, and only when we are green, we can do refactor, do the refactor step. But we can only do this while we are green state, and we will reach this in a few minutes. So, okay, nice. We have our first expectation, and it's green. Just like the TypeScript is an error TypeScript, so I just create here a type just to just because of the TypeScript error, but it's not actually something about the test itself. And I can type this. Okay, okay, great. Nice. So we can check here. The user is required to provide name, password, and password confirmation to be able to register. At least in my opinion, we fulfill this requirement. Now we can start doing something like, let's, I don't know, do this when the user minimum length is 3. So we can create another context here, like when all required fields are provided.
Pega, I think that your screen have just stopped sharing. Is that on
Really?
your side?
Oh, maybe I just click stop,
No, okay.
uh, like in
Okay,
this. I don't know. You're not seeing,
we're
but
back.
it has a button here. Okay.
All right, all right.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. So we can create this another context, another big context, that is when all required fields are provided. And then if we are trying to test this, fulfill this requirement, we can create something like, but the name length is less than 3. I don't know. And then we can like copy this just to make things faster. And I don't know, we can create just a normal, we are passing all the required fields, but the name length is not is less than 3. So in this case, we want to return. I forgot the it here. So when all required fields are provided, but the name length is less than 3, we want to return, I don't know, minimum length error at name field. Okay, and we can put this up. And what we expect is that the name will have minimum length error, and that's it. Okay, if we save this, we are in red. That is what we expect. We expect minimum length, and we are receiving blank here because we just put this return, and that's true, right? So I would just commit here minimum length name spec. And what now? The same thing that already mentioned. What is the most straightforward thing that we can do here to make this test pass, go to green? So probably we can do something like, I don't know, we can get the name here, and like if name dot length is less than 3, we can now return minimum length here instead of the blank ones. And we save this. Now that we have the green in this first test in the minimum length, but actually we had a red. This test, that the first test that we created, now is red.
Yeah.
Okay, probably because the length of an empty string is 0, right? So we can do something like, we only will check the length of the name if the name is not blank, if it's not an empty string. And if you do this, great, we are now in green. And as I mentioned, we can now refactor this code if we want, because we are in green state. But I will not do this because, in my opinion, this is not a code that needs to be refactored, at least in this scenario that we are right now. So I will commit and do commit the minimum length name implementation. Great. So now if you go back to the requirements, we already fulfilled this requirement. Let's go to the next one. The user password minimum length is 8. Okay. So we can do the same thing here, create another context. And now you can see that, like, I'm telling a story, as I mentioned, but now I'm in different context. Here I was in the context that the name length was less than 3, and now I will be in a context that the password length is less than 8, right? So is it different? Is a different context, and I will create the same thing here, that it should returns, I forgot an S here, returns a minimum length error at password field. Now only the password field, right? And I will just copy paste this. Great. Now the name, the error is in the password, right? So I have a password with a length less than 8. And now I expect that the password field that will have the minimum length error. And if I save this, I am in red. I have a test that is failing. Okay, great. So I will do the same here, but now with the password spec, right? And then exactly the same thing. The most straightforward change that we can do in this code to make this test pass to go to green. Probably just copy paste this password, and now I have just to grab this and put 8 here. Okay, great. We are in green again. We can
Cool.
think about ourselves again. We need to refactor this. We want to refactor this. I don't know. I will not. Probably I will wait a little bit more to do this refactoring. But I only have this. I'm only allowed to think about this if I am green. If I'm red, I just want to get to green as quickly as possible.
So I think when you say that, I think the idea behind it is that like now I have this. Now I am sure enough that what I'm doing has the behavior
Yeah,
that is described in the requirements file, and then if I want to refactor, it means like it implies that I'm not going to change the behavior, right? If you think in terms of
yeah,
a black
exactly.
box, like the behavior should not change if I refactor it. I can refactor because I think it has a better performance or is less complexity, cognitive complexity, whatever metric I want to use. But the behavior of the subject under test does not change, and that is important, right? So
Yeah,
that's why you
exactly.
need to have that green because we can be sure that anything that I do that I introduce a bug is going to be caught by the test.
By the
And I think
test.
that there are two questions, Pega, that came when you were discussing. Actually, the guys are very uh, already like drop a lot of questions, so I'm gonna read some of them.
Okay.
Um, I think Carlos asked here, how do I know if the test I am doing is not a false positive? In my experience, I think that is something that is much more related on how good you are at writing tests and not actually necessarily how good you are at writing TDD, right? Because we can
Yeah,
always write
exactly.
tests that have false positives and false negatives. It's common, right? We go to a test and you see a test and you say, man, this test is not testing what it's supposed to test. It's testing other thing. Like, and that I think it's more related to your ability to write tests and how well you master your stack. Like for example, here PH masters the JavaScript stack with Jest as testing framework, and we used to do that a lot in Rails as well with RSpec. So you have to master and understand what you're doing when you are doing your assertions and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Assertions, stubs, and things. If you don't master that, and that's why we were discussing, right? You have to understand really well how you are doing tests. It becomes very difficult to catch those right, those false positives and negatives. I don't know, Pega, what's
Yeah.
your opinion on that?
Yeah, I totally agree, but I have like at least I do something that when I have this feeling that could be a false positive, I break I break my test on purpose to see if it's gonna return the error that I
Yeah, me
expect
too. That's
to
a good.
while breaking. So I don't know if I I have this feeling that this is a false positive, but it for some reason I'm getting green here. I cannot change. I don't know. I can change this for name. So I'm breaking the task, and I see that oh okay that was what I expected. I was expecting password and I was expecting name and I received password. So I know that this is not a false a positive test. So you can do this kind of things, break your own code, your own test, and see if it breaks the exactly the way that you expect.
Man, that's the best tip that you could ever give to the guys, because more a lot of times when I was a developer, right, I was doing exactly that, precisely that. Like, I was very like, when you kind of write a test and you are, that's too easy, man, there's something that is not
Yeah,
right about it, and then you kind of try to break your own test, and then you cannot break it, and then eventually find out that you are testing nothing, like you're testing a stub, like instead of
yeah,
testing
that
what you should have
happens a
been
lot.
testing. So it's a great tip. It's a great tip. I think Gustavo asked it here. He said hello and asked us, in what situation is it good to use a factory patterns with TDD? Do you have
Well,
any
I,
go
I,
ahead?
I think that it's always a good uh, it's always good to use factor patterns with TDD, especially if you're gonna use the factor pattern to create the objects, the entities that you want to test. You know, so this like in Rails we have like a gem called factory bot, and we use this gem to create the like, for example, if I need to test a user, and but I only need to change to test if I don't know the username minimum length is 3. I can create an object using the factory, a new user object using the factory, and just change a name. So yeah, I think that it's always for me a good thing to use the factor pattern with TDD if when we are talking about creating the test environment. If we are talking about just like the production code, and about the implementation, and oh, maybe I can use a factor pattern here, or I can use another pattern here, you will eventually reach this and choose this, make this decision while you are doing the refactor part of the code. While you are in green and you notice, maybe I think that is good to implement a factor pattern here. So I will do it, and I will do it here because I am in green state. So I have like the this I have the safety to change the code, to refactor code, and know if I'm gonna break something or not. So
And it's
yeah,
also what something that is interesting to notice is that uh, by the time we are getting going, getting better at writing tests and writing TDD, we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna be refactoring the test itself, right? The spec itself, like
yeah,
how we're gonna managing those, describe it and its scenarios, how the test is gonna run. So eventually, if you come to a code base that has thousands of 10,000 of tests, you're gonna start pay attention to those things, right? Can I use a factory to create and manage the data for the test, for example, which Pega was talking about, right? Factory bot is a gem that does exactly that in Rails. So you're gonna have like concerns and things that you can start to paying attention after you kind of start writing tests. And it's very common, right? When you start writing tests, eventually your writing spec file is going to be bigger than your implementation itself, because
yeah,
depending on the language, on the framework, test framework that you're using, it becomes a little bit convoluted and not very straightforward to write the test itself. So it can become very common actually to have a somehow large test file and a test in a subject under test, the class under test, that has I don't
SVG,
know,
right?
fewer lines, right? I don't know, 10, 20, 30 lines of code. So that happens a lot, right? The spec
Yeah,
usually is bigger than the code itself.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the last question, Pega, just before you keep going there, Marcio sent us a question just to make it clear. Are you saying that if you need to refactor your test code, you must have all tests working before doing so? Is it any kind of TDD best practice?
I don't I don't think that is some TDD best practice. Is this is exactly what TDD is about. It's not that bad, some best practice. This is TDD because, like, if you search about TDD, you will always find this pattern: red, green refactor, red, green refactor, red, green refactor, and you will notice that the refactor step is always after the green step. So, like, you can do refactoring in a code base without testing. You can do refactor in the red step, but you probably won't have the confidence that you're not actually doing a refactor. You're changing some behavior. If you're changing some behavior, you're not doing a refactor. So that's why it's like we need to do the refactoring part in the green the green step, because that, like, I just finished the test, I am in green. If I do some refactor here and I got red, it's because I changed the behavior of the code. And if I do this in red, probably I won't see this, that I'm changing the behavior of the code, and you can get later false positive test and so on. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
a very important distinction, right?
Yeah,
What we're calling here refactoring is not about changing the behavior of the code. Changing the behavior of the code is not refactoring. For example, let's say that we want to change the return type that PH was saying there. Let's say that we want to change the errors object. Now the errors object is an object that returns a array of elements instead of the elements inside as key of the objects. It looks like the same thing, but you're not doing refactoring right now. We are changing the behavior of the application. You're changing the object we're returning
yeah,
to the API. So this is not refactoring, right? This actually, we're not gonna. Of course, it's important to have everything green before you do that. Before you do that change, you can have a baseline, right, about your code, but then you're changing the behavior of the application, and what you're talking about over here is about refactoring. Let's say, I know if you guys are familiar with, I don't know, synthetic analysis, synthetic code analysis. For example, when you run an analyzer and check if your, I don't know, if your class or if your function has a complexity that is difficult of other people to understand, and at the end of the day we write code to other people to read. You kind of have to remember that, right? So we are trying to do something that is not very messy in terms of implementation. And then what we are saying is that eventually you want to refactor that, either change variable names, break down a big function into smaller methods, have some sort of private methods that do the hard part of the perform part of the perform function, and then eventually, uh, actually refactor the code and write it in a better way, in a way that is easier to understand, easier to read, and hopefully has a better performance. You're not changing the behavior application. That's why it's important to have everything green. Then you can do whatever you want inside that class in their test, and you is confident that your tests are working, that you're not breaking the application, right?
yeah, exactly. Okay, so uh, let's continue. Do you have any more questions?
Just a one from Gustavo. Gustavo Salles asked here if there is a factory bot package for Node. Do you know any like similar to factory bot for?
Um, Man, from heart, I I can tell you, but I can look up later and send to you, Martu, if you want.
Yeah, we
Because,
can
like,
send
in the
guys.
past in the past 2 years, I was working with Rails and factory bots, so uh, that's why I told about it. So, but I can take a look and send to you.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So let's continue. So we just uh, did this requirement, right? And then, as we talked about, we can, like, we are in green, and if we want, we I don't know, we can extract this to to another function. So I don't know. Let's do this just to you guys to see that what is the refactor and what will be like changing the implementation, changing the behavior. So I don't know. I can create a function here, validate length. I don't know, and put this inside it, right? And I don't know. I can create an errors object here. Uh, and then I can receive, I don't know, the name and the password. I can create a type here for this function. Validate length. The same thing here, the name and the password. And this is the validate length type. And I don't know, I can receive the errors object here. The error is gonna be like let's create an error type here. That's gonna be a string, and this could be no, it's just an object. And then I don't know, we can just put here errors dot name would be name of length, and probably I don't know, maybe password name of length. And we can call this function here, validate length, pass the name, pass the password, the errors object, and then and then I can create a validation here to see if there's some keys inside this object. So I can grab the object keys, see the length, and if the length is greater than 0, because I have it has an error here, right? And we can just return this thing. So I did a little bit of refactoring here, right? I moved some code around, create some function. I don't know if I broke something. So I will save this, and then I see that I didn't break anything. I have the context that I moved some code around, create some function here, but the behavior of the code is still the same. I don't know if for some reason I doing this refactoring, this I don't know. I put this 4 instead of 3. Actually put 2, and now I have a feedback that I broke something while doing factor. So that's why it's important to do this refactoring in green state. If I was in red state, I couldn't have the confidence, I couldn't have the sure that I broke something or not, So yeah, that's it. I did some refactoring because I was in green state and I wanted to do it, and I had the confidence that I didn't break anything. So that is the actually what is refactoring is. Okay, let's do this the last uh, uh, this requirement here. The user password and password confirmation should be equal. So let's just copy paste something here for the password is not equal to password confirmation. Returns, we can return, I don't know, invalid password confirmation error at both password and password confirmation fields, right? And I know do this. The password is different, and I will expect that the password confirmation now will be a password confirmation error. I don't know. And if I save this, I am red. Great. Let commit this password confirmation spec. and then I can do the implementation. I will do just right down below if password and password confirmation that I need to get here, and they are different, right? That's information. I can return this object return with password confirmation. Great, I'm in red. Nice, another requirement fulfilled. Let's commit this. Implementation.
What one thing that's very interesting, sorry, Pegajo, just to notice that you are committing the things that you are doing as like you are fulfilling
Yeah,
the requirements, and then you are committing the code, right? So you kind of have if you go git log, you're gonna have the history of things that the steps that you were making until you came to your final solution, right? I think that very is interesting to show how you build the solution, right? In the end, you're gonna have like the final commit. If you squash it, you're gonna see
yeah,
the one solo implementation, but you can see actually the step by step that you are doing when you read the history of the commits, right?
yeah, and this is great, especially when you are starting with TDD, studying TDD, because later you can just go to the Git and see the comments history and see that gradually you were implementing the stuff, and fulfill the requirements. So that's a good way to do it, to have this history. Okay, great. Let's do the last requirement, that the user should not be able to register with an email that is already used. Okay, this seems a bit more complex, but let's do this. Let's copy this context here, and let's see that. But the email provided is already in use. You know, we can do something like this, and we want to return uh, already in use error at email field, right? And then we can do something like, let me just change here. We can like pass an email here, okay? Email, an already in use email, and we will expect that we have this error at email field, right? So if we save this, we we are in red, right? We can commit if we want. Email already in use spec. And then you can look at this code and think about what is the most straightforward change that you can do to make this task pass, right? So if we're expecting that if we pass this email, we want to receive this message, that's exactly what you're going to do. So if email and email is equal to already in use, return an email that already in use here, and I need to grab I already grabbed the email. Okay. And if I say this, okay, this is green. Great. But like, this is totally wrong, right? I can do, I don't know if for some reason I pass another email, I'm already in use two, it's gonna break, right? So when you have this kind of situation, you see that the test and the code itself, it's they are bind together. If I change some, like, I can't do anything here that won't break here, and I can do anything here that won't break here. The test the test know the inner functionality of the code, and it's not, this is not good. This is a code smell, a bad practice. So probably the thing that we can do here to solve this is, like, remember that Melo mentioned that we can also do the refactor in our test. That's what I'm going to do here. Like, because for example, to do this kind of validation, we will need to, I don't know, have a user database, I don't know, user array, whatever, to check if already exists a user with that email or not, right? So we can run on this. This is something that we need to do to fulfill this requirement, because this is not production code, right? This is wrong. So one thing that we can do here is, like, the simple thing that we can do. I would do this just to, because of the live and the testing and thing. Probably we will have to, like, have a real database, or I don't know, read from some file. I will just create a users array here, and I will just type here user to create this type user here. That's gonna be an ID, and we'll have email, number, and password. And then I can import this user. Actually, is, and then we can pass this array of users to our service, in while we are doing the initializing of the service. And we can create, like, the, actually here, the constructor, and create this users variable that probably, I forgot the syntax. Give me a sec. Is like, oh yeah, just private users, and then we type the user here, and like the TypeScript we already, it's exactly the same that we create, like this dot user, and then we receive the users here, and then this dot users dot user. It's like a more straightforward approach that we can do here with TypeScript. So now we have access to this users variable, and we can check now. I don't know, we can create a user exist, and see that if s dot users dot find user dot email, okay, sorry, user dot email, it's equal to the email here, that the email that it's being provided. And I will only do this email exists, and if this is true, it's because we have this error, right? And then if I save this, I will, now I'm red, because, like, I'm expecting already in use here, but my array is empty. So I need to somehow populate this array before making the assertions. So I will just, like, create an already in use email here variable, just to make it easier, and I will push this, create users.length plus one, name other user, email, already in use email, and password, whatever the password. And then I will check here if I will pass the same email here, right? And then now, if I save this, the test will pass, because now I already populated this user here, right? So for example, if I change this email for whatever other email, the test will fail because the user that we pushed here has a different email, right? So it's just like we have a repository, a user repository, but I just did this because it's simple to do. And yeah, that's it, man. We fulfilled
Awesome.
this requirement. And now, like, we have the freedom to refactor this code in whatever the way we want.
Okay, do you have a scenario where everything is good to create a user? Have you rolled a
Oh,
scenario?
actually, yeah, that's true. Remember that in the beginning that we say that not every time the requirements are explicit. Like we have these requirements, but we don't see anything here that the user should be created if everything passes. So we should test this. That's uh, thank you for reminding me. So like we can we have this four contexts, like the fail context, and we can create the last context that is like when all required fields are provided and the validation pass. I don't know, something like this. Probably we can make this better. We can do this in the refactor code, the refactor part.
There's a
But
part.
just
Yeah.
to go here, and probably we can do like it creates a new user, okay? And we can like just me grab something here, paste. I don't need this. Done. Okay, and now I can do like two exertions. I can expect that the user's length to be one, right? Because in
Right.
this test scenario, we didn't create any user, and we actually have a true here because we are now in a happy path. And then errors will be new, and data will be something like the the last ID of the user array. So here I'm grabbing the last position of the array and grabbing the ID. Okay, if I save this, okay, I am in red, but it's strange, because like Jest will do the assertions and will fail in the first assertion that he found, the fail assertion. And if you take a look here, you see that actually this assertion is passing, right? Because I don't know if I commit this, we are all green, but it's strange. We are not creating anything here. We are not creating any users here. We are not creating any users here. So this happened because like we are sharing the same variable between the test,
Yeah.
and
You're not
this
cleaning
is
up right in the
yeah,
before
you are not
hood,
cleaning up.
doing it
And
properly.
this, like, if you have one test, the test should be isolated from each other. Each it should not impact in the other it. So to fix this, we can easily create use the before each helper from Jest, and actually we'll do this. Now, before each test, we will just clean up the array. And now, okay, now we are expected 1 and we're receiving 0. Great. Okay, so let's do this. How we can do this? Okay, we can create like, I don't know if everything passes here. We can create the user. I don't know. Is dot users dot length +1. The name is name, email, password. and then we can push this user to the array, and then we can return exactly this thing here, right? It's gonna be just user.id. Okay, but you guys probably want to know that this is wrong, right? Because if I save this, the reader will just remove the last return because I'm returning something here. But like if I save this, you know that the task that creates a user is passive, but now I broke it break the other
First,
test, the first that we created. So like
yeah,
if we didn't have this kind of testing, probably we'll not get to know this. So we can, I don't know what we can do here to make this thing pass. I can do this because I'm in refactor code and refactor part. Uh, I can create, I don't know, if here, if we don't have a name, if we don't have email,
yes,
and we don't have a password, and we don't have a password confirmation, we are, we need to return this, right? Return this, I can save, and now I am all green. Great. And now
awesome.
I can refactor this code whatever the way that I want. That I know that I fulfill all the requirements. And now I can just play myself here and do whatever I want. So that's why we talking about the way, like, to shift the way of thinking. If you go and think about testing first and fulfill the requirements, test the behavior first, doesn't matter the way that you implement here, because this code it's ugly. Let's be honest. Like, look at this. If I just look at this code, I don't know what is the code is doing. Like
Yeah,
but I have the confidence of the tests. So now I can refactor this code and do whatever I want.
and a plus is that you already created a documentation for that, right? You don't
Yeah,
need to. You kind of have the best documentation ever because you know that your test runs and you know what your application does because you tested it. So you kind of documented it. You kind of created documentation already, right? So which is a plus. And when you write tests into this form, like more like a business driven development, like a BDD/TDD way of writing your spec, which I like a lot.
yeah, that's totally true.
Awesome, man. That's great. I think you nailed it. Like,
Thank you.
um,
I will just,
probably I think you have already passed like more time than
yeah,
what
we
you
don't
have
have any
already
more time,
like
right?
proposed, 1 hour and a half. Yeah, yeah, I think we should like wrapping up and letting the guys know enjoy their evening. But I think that's great. You kind of nailed it and showed like everything that we talked about into this live session. That was awesome.
Yeah,
I really like that you were committing you were doing your commits as you were fulfilling your scenarios of tests. That is very important, precisely in the beginning when you are learning how to do. You can always go back to your pull request and see what you did, what steps
yeah, exactly.
you fulfilled. That's very useful.
Great.
Awesome, awesome, man. That's great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
I will just, okay,
I
stop
think
my screen here.
Sure. I think that if you don't mind, you can share with the guys your GitHub repository that you created for the live. I think that you have this Node test and you already have a React
Yeah, yeah.
already, right?
I the like I created this because I wanted to show that we can do this in front end as well, but unfortunately we pass a little bit of the time. But you guys, you can go to the repository and see, like, how you can do the test in the front end side, and could like you can create your own challenge. Trying to implement the test in the that we did in the front end, doing TDD. I think that could be a great challenge to do, trying to learn TDD.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so I do encourage the guys that want to go a little further and have a go, have a try to clone your repository, fork it, and start
Yeah,
playing with it and having fun with it. I think that Karina sent here, right, the link to you guys. So HTTD Live is in your GitHub, so you guys can have fun with that. But yeah, awesome, awesome. Pega, thanks a lot, man. It was a pleasure. It's been a long time we haven't had
we have
a pair programming
a pair
session,
programming
right?
session.
Either discussing cloud deployment with Kubernetes or TDD, whatever. But
Whatever.
yeah, I kind of have a
Miss the old times,
good
man,
feeling.
but always a pleasure.
Yeah, miss. Yeah, always a pleasure, and I hope that you enjoyed as well. And I think that we all learned a lot with you today. And yeah, awesome. And thank you guys as well that were with us here almost 2 hours of pair programming and talking about tests. And sorry to take longer than we planned, but I think it was worth it. And if you have guys have any questions, any further questions, want to discuss about it, you have TDD. I'm kind of crazy already. You have Vega LinkedIn
Yeah, you
link
can
over
reach me
there.
out
You
anytime.
can reach him out and drop him a message and drop me a message if you want as well, so you can talk about it. Okay.
Great.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you, and thank you,
Thank you
everyone. Have
all.
a
Thank you
nice
for this
evening.
opportunity. Have
Yeah.
a nice week to
Thank
all.
you for taking the time, and yeah, sure.